So let's bring the meeting to order. This is the May 26, 2021 meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge. The time now is 7:31 p.m. This meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge is being held remotely and recorded via Zoom due to the COVID-19 pandemic and is in compliance with the provisions of Executive Orders 103 and 104, the Open Public Meetings Act, and associated regulations. Notice of this meeting was published in the Bergen Record on January 20, 2021, and the Ridgewood News on January 22, 2021, posted on the front doors of Borough Hall and posted on the borough's website. The notice included the dial-in, login information necessary for public participation and access to this meeting remotely. A copy of the agenda for this meeting is made available on the borough's website near the posting of the meeting notice and includes the dial-in and login information. During the public comment period of this meeting, if you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand button on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. The board will address you by name or by the last 4 digits of your telephone number. You may mute and unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon on Zoom or dialing *6 on your telephone keypad. You must state your name and address prior to making a public comment. Members of the public were permitted to submit written comments prior to the meeting via mail or email, which will be read during the public comment period. So with that, Marina, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Mayor?
Here.
Okay. Mr. Caslin?
Here.
Ms. Boland?
She's absent this evening.
Absent. Okay. Mr. Merman?
Here.
Mr. Grasso?
Here.
Mr. Cray? I believe he's absent this evening.
He is absent this evening, yes.
Mr. Arkelian?
Present.
Councilman Kinigo?
Here.
Mr. Gibbons?
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Okay.
Okay. One other bit of formality for this evening's meeting. We're going to adhere to a 10:30 p.m. curfew for this evening's meeting only. With that, let's proceed into tonight's business. We do not yet have minutes for the 5/12 meeting, so we will table that for this meeting. We're going to go a little bit out of order this evening, just to cover a couple of things I think which we can cover relatively quickly. So the first item for discussion this evening will be the resolution recommending the adoption of ordinance number 21-15, an ordinance by the Borough of River Edge in the County of Bergen, New Jersey, prohibiting the operation of any class of cannabis business within its geographical boundaries. Copy of the resolution has been circulated. Are there any comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, would you like a motion?
There being no comments, yes, please, Mr. Merman.
Okay, I'll make a motion that the Land Use Board of River Edge recommend regarding ordinance 2115, recommend to the mayor and council that the board has no comments and we offer our approval, their consideration for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Merman. May I have a second?
Second. Gibbons.
Mr. Gibbons, thank you. Marina, would you call the roll, please?
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Caslin is ineligible to vote as he was not present at the meeting last week. Ms.
Yeah.
Boland is absent tonight. Mr. Merman?
Yes.
Mr. Grasso and Mr. Cray are also ineligible to vote on this memorialization. Mr. Arkelian?
I'm going to
Oh,
recluse myself on this vote because I've been engaged by a couple different companies
okay.
that are doing this.
Councilman Kinigo?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer?
I'm voting no for the reasons stated at the last meeting.
Okay. And Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, and the motion passes.
Okay,
And the resolution will be delivered to the borough clerk.
okay, thank you, Marina. Let's come back to the discussion on the Bergen County Historical Society. Let's move into memorializations. We have for approval this evening a resolution for Jack Ansarian, 282 Oak Avenue, Block 1206 and Lot 4, granting variances for the minimum front yard setback, maximum lot coverage, and maximum improved lot coverage. Any comments on the resolution that was circulated? There being no comments, may I have a motion to approve?
Making a motion, Mr. Chairman, that the Municipal Land Use Board of River Edge regarding the Jack Azarian property at 282 Oak Avenue, River Edge, block 1206, lot 4. Be those variances be granted, and that it be noted that this applicant worked very closely with the board to come to a very good solution of the problems that we faced.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Merman. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. Marina, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Merman,
Yes,
Mr. Arkelian,
Yes.
Councilman Kanigo,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
yes.
All right, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Marina.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know that Tom Burns has joined us yet. I don't see him on here, and I actually have to go 2 screens. We have a large cat.
I do not see him either.
Okay. All right, why don't we get started then? Let's go back to the discussion for the Bergen County Historical Society. 1201 and 1209 Main Street, block 1304, lots 2 and 3, block 1303, lot 2, block 1305, lot 1, and block 1306, lot 4. To review changes of the board approved plans as required by the Bergen County Planning Board. Let's come back to Tom. I'd like to open it up now for discussion to the board. Any questions or comments? Let me start with Mr. Gibbons, if I may.
No questions at this time, Mr. Caslen.
Okay. Mr. Esposito?
Not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Pfeffer?
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arkelian?
I'm good for now.
Thank you. Mr. Grasso?
No comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor?
No comments at this time.
Okay. Councilman?
No comments, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Merman?
This is a historical society, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I think it should be noted that we did get a response from the fire department. And there's been some emails going back and forth with Mr. Barrett. Number one, I'd also like to know if Mr. Costa's on the line.
Yes, I believe he just
Yes.
joined us. Good evening, Mr. Costa. You're on mute.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I apologize.
Shame on you. Don't let it happen again.
All right, I will not, Mr. Merman.
Okay. So Does somebody want to give us a summary? Maybe the applicant's attorney will tell us what transpired and where we stand right now?
Yes, as was required, we proceeded before the Bergen County Planning Board. And there were discussions between Mr. Griswold and Eric Timzak, resulting, and Mr. Griswold is with us tonight. He can tell the board exactly what transpired in that regard. Mr. Griswold?
Yes, good evening, everyone. So I had a conversation with Mr. Timzak back in September of 2019 regarding the application. At that time, Mr. Timzak recommended and requested that the improvements that were proposed within the county right-of-way be removed. He felt that the project was should be basically coordinated with the future plans. He sent us no future plans. He requested we remove the improvements, so we removed the improvements from the county right-of-way. Subsequently, on December 10th, 2020, we received the county planning board approval.
So it was the determination by a sole individual in the county?
Mr.
Did
Timzak,
that go, did it go before their board? The county planning board?
the approval letter is from the county, Bergen Department of Planning and Engineering. And it says, the plan for the above referenced project has been reviewed by this office and been found acceptable. Accordingly, no further action by the county planning board will be required. And I believe, Mr. Barrett, you probably sent a copy of that letter to the board.
We did. We provided a copy back in December of 2020.
Okay. So basically their rationale was do nothing at this time, wait to the future.
Correct.
Okay. And that was based on the Bergen County Planning Department's representative for River Edge. So,
Correct.
okay. So that was the whole rationale.
Well, it's also their road, and therefore they have jurisdiction.
I don't dispute their jurisdiction. I'm looking for their rationale.
You'd have to inquire of them, Mr. Merman. We did what we were told to do by this board. We changed our plans in accordance with your request. Those requests were denied by the county.
Okay, very good.
Just as a summary to add as well, our office reviewed all of the submissions provided by Mr. Barrett, and they met the requirements that the board had imposed at the time of adoption. And so now it's appropriate for the board to consider the memorialization now.
You understand that? Okay, so that's how we got to where we got. Now, as I recall, there were 3 open issues on this application. One of them was the sewer line, and Mr. Costa was working with the board engineer, with your engineer, and you folks were working with the apartment real estate across the way to go into their system, and you went back and forth quite a bit. Has that, I'm assuming that item's been resolved.
Correct.
It's been finalized and the easement was recorded.
Mhm.
Okay, and you review that, Mr. Costa, and you're happy
Yes.
with that?
That is correct.
Okay, good. The second item, as I recall, was the off-site parking. And I believe that the applicant has submitted a very thick
License agreement.
it looked more like a doctoral dissertation But yeah, it was, and I'm looking to see that our board attorney reviewed that and is happy with that.
Yes, yes, we reviewed it and we have found it. It's okay.
Okay, so that's acceptable. So the last one we had obviously was the walkway. And we just said that our land use board asked that the drawings be revised for safety purposes. The applicant did that, the county, and we asked them to do that so they could go to the county for their review. That obviously we just discussed that they rejected it. And so we still have that as an open safety item. Now, I think that before we get to memorialization of the current plans, we're going to need a motion on the resubmitted drawings. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I just want to know where we're going. Okay. So everybody else had no comments. So I guess my comments that I originally raised regarding the walkway and the safety still remain. That the applicant was kind enough and had foresight to incorporate, which I thought was a very nice solution, but they were removed by the county. And I think the way I view this is that basically we're at what normally I would call a classical situation where a public hazard is identified, particularly one involving traffic, where there's a need for a stop sign or a traffic light or something like that. The public raises it, and the powers to be, so to speak, either ignore it or defeat it. And that usually happens or remains until a serious event happens where somebody's injured or very seriously, or God forbid, there's a loss of life. And then usually action occurs. I think the situation we have right now is very similar to that situation where we recommended something, it was rejected by the county, and now that safety issue still remains. And I feel very strongly about this. This walkway condition has been reduced to the point where it is as it originally was, and nothing has happened.
Right.
I am deeply concerned about this regarding the safety from what I see, especially as an engineer. Okay, I think that this whole situation, somebody needs to have foresight besides me. I think the board members should look at this very carefully. And Mr. Barrett, I know I stated a long time ago that I support the mission of your historical society, but I cannot morally support this potential hazard and loss of life. And in my view, these negatives of this current situation far outweigh the positive that would bring to the community. And I ask that when we take a vote on a motion that's got to be made, that you consider this deeply yourself, because if you vote for it and something happens, you're going to bear the burden morally. So that's my basic statement. It looks like I'm the only one who feels strongly about it. So if somebody wants to make this motion to accept the application as it is, be my guest. I'm not going to do it.
And just to be clear, it's the motion is regarding the memorialization.
No.
Of the revised, you got to make a motion of the revised drawings.
Correct.
The memorialization, you changed the drawings. Did you notify people? Has this been advertised?
Yes,
It has. Did you
yes.
submit? Oh, okay. Did you
Chairman,
submit proof
if I can, and Vice Chair, if I can just interject for 1 minute, I think the applicant should put on the record what the change was. And maybe the rest of the board, I don't know if it's the same board members when this took place. Basically, it's the crosswalk. So where the old Pizza Town was is where the parking lot is. There's a crosswalk. They were gonna go across. There's no stop sign. The county rejected what the board originally approved, but obviously it's the jurisdiction of the county and not the town. They were asked to come back at some point when the county approved it, which ultimately the county disapproved what the board approved. So I think you're gonna need, again, I'm not sure. I think you need to get a new resolution if it passes, and then you would have to get a final resolution to finalize the, again, and please, Mr. Barrett, jump in or.
I mean, I think that the changes that have been made to the plan can certainly be outlined. And then the board would act upon that. But I think it's reflected in the resolution that was prepared that these revised plans were in fact submitted some time ago.
No, I understand that,
reflecting-
but what I'm saying, Mr. Barrett, maybe I'm incorrect again, but the board approved the plan based on putting a crosswalk at a certain location. The county rejected it, and it was the county jurisdiction at that point. But I think what Mr. Merman is saying, the vice chair, is that goes against what the original approval was. So I don't know if you need to put on testimony tonight to say this is what it is and this is what the county did. I don't think you can just vote on a final resolution. I think you need to put testimony on what the change actually is.
Is there some way that we can put it up on the screen so that people watching this later can understand what it is that we're talking about?
Yes, if you look at sheet number 7 of the applicants, it was a July 26, 2019 submittal. If you can find that and put it on the screen, you will see all the walkways and all the traffic control devices with stop signs and flashing lights and everything else.
I don't think that it is necessary for the board to vote on the revised plans because the resolution includes and incorporates the revised plans. And
Well, it's subject to a county approval. But the question is, here's my question. I'm not an attorney. I don't want any fallback on the town as far as liability. The town approved something based on safety. The county has said, no, it's our jurisdiction and we're not going to allow this. So I think the change should be made. And I think it's got to go on the record that the change was made because of the county jurisdiction. And if anything happens, then I think it falls back on the county of Bergen and not the borough of River Edge. But again, I'm not.
Mr. Costa,
not an
were
attorney.
you here when Mr. Griswold spoke before?
Again, I came in after the fact. I don't think he's in,
maybe
with
we'll
all due
just have him
respect, I don't think he's an engineer. I don't think again, I think you have to prepare, put the plans on the record, put it on the record that the county has approved this. It's not consistent with what the town approved. And the jurisdiction goes back to the county, period, end of story. And if anything happens, God forbid, it's on the county. It's on yourselves and the county and not the town. And I think that's where Mr. Merman is going. And again, if I'm out of line, please jump in. But I think in today's society with litigation, this was discussed at length as far as the safety to have people park in the parking lot and walk to the building. And quite frankly, anybody on the screen tonight knows, quite frankly, I doubt people are going to walk to Hackensack Avenue, cross at that intersection, come back down the road and go over there. And if they do, I will be amazed. And Mr. Merman, please jump in. Maybe I'm
That's
wrong.
right.
Hold on a second. Ms. Steinle, this seems like a reasonable request that Mr. Costa is making. It seems appropriate. What is your ruling on it?
Well, I was just speaking with Nylima. She's going to join the meeting as well because she was the attorney for the board at the time, so she could provide additional insight. But in my discussions with her, we didn't feel it was necessary because all of those changes that were discussed in the revised plans are incorporated in the resolution.
But I think the question is less about the changes that were made, but more about the fact that the changes were made contrary to what was previously approved by the board. And I think the concern here is that whatever we ultimately take action upon reflects that the new changes were contrary to what we had previously approved.
That's
So
all.
Exactly right.
Exactly. That's all, again, and I think that's just for the record. Again, God forbid something happens, tag, you're it. So if the county says this is how it has to happen, it's their jurisdiction, it's contrary to what the borough said, the borough gets a free pass.
I don't even think the borough gets a free pass, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not sure that's entirely correct, so I wouldn't make that leap.
Okay.
It would be a major defense. You got
So,
deep pockets, we're gonna sue you first.
I have a procedural question.
Hmm.
Couldn't we vote on the resolution and then take a second vote on just to put an official or a formal statement in the record to the effect that
No.
no, you don't
No.
think so?
I don't believe so. What I think you have to do, you had a July 26, 2019 drawing that the board approved for the county to review. Fine. The county reviewed it, rejected it. You came back with a revised drawing, the same drawing with a revised date that you now have to make a motion to pass, and based on that motion, you can make your resolution to approve or disapprove. That's the way I see it.
I agree.
And you're very foolish. You're very foolish if you don't do that from a liability standpoint.
Good evening, Nailima.
Good evening, Chris. Board members, how are you?
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Merman.
Good evening. Haven't seen you in quite a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to explain to you where we are. We have just been reviewing the fact that the county rejected the drawing and the recommendation of the land use board. And that was based on a July 26, 2019 drawing prepared by the applicant. All right. There's a resolution before us, which I think the procedure we really needed to do is the drawing was revised. So we have a new drawing or a revised drawing of the walkway conditions. I believe that we require a motion to accept or reject that revised drawing. Based on that, you can make a resolution to accept or reject the application. I think, and Mr. Costa, our engineer, agrees that we're very foolish from a liability standpoint not to do that. So that's the conundrum we're in.
Okay, Mr. Merman, if I may, it's been quite some time, and I know Mr. Barrett is here with us this evening. My recollection is that when this application was before the board voted to approve the application subject to the jurisdiction of the county to deal with these issues regarding the signalization, the traffic light, and so forth.
Right.
And this then went to the county. County said no. County did not grant approval to the applicant. So what subsequently happened is that's why we're now back before the board for the board to memorialize the resolution. So procedurally, I think that it is not necessary to have another vote. This is not a redo. This is a subject to county approval.
No, you're voting on a revised drawing. The drawing was never voted on in its current condition.
If I can interject for 1 minute, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, that would be true if the resolution was memorialized and it was subject to county approval. And then if it's a de minimis change, no big deal. but there was a lot of discussion as far as where the people parked and where the people walked.
Rob,
So I would, and again, I'm not an attorney and I'm gonna put that on the record. All I want is to protect the borough. God forbid, because you know it, and probably everybody on the screen knows it. People are gonna walk from point A to point B the shortest distance.
Exactly.
Period, end of story. And the shortest distance isn't to go park, go to Hackensack Avenue, wait for the light, cross over, and then cross back over. I'd be amazed unless there is barriers there, and that was discussed at length. So the county rejected it, and quite frankly, there's a new plan. They should put on what the change is and vote on a new resolution, and then go to final. I don't think you can just memorialize a final because it's not, it was never memorialized. I mean, this is a long time ago.
So what's the
years.
hurry? What's the hurry? You don't have equipment out there digging holes.
Why we let
You took 2 years to get to this point, Mr. Barrett.
if I may,
Mr. Berman, I'm very sorry that it took us a year and a half and it cost my client thousands of dollars to deal with the DEP for a parking agreement, which you call a treatise or something. And the fact of the matter is, that's why it took so long.
Right.
Okay, it had nothing to do with us. We pursued it diligently. I
Mr.
was
Barrett, with all due
constantly in touch
respect,
with the
with
DEP.
all due respect, the DEP is a stakeholder in that property. They're a stakeholder. So if it took you a year and a half or 2 years to get an agreement to have people to park to a place that they're a stakeholder in, that's ridiculous.
I agree
shame on
100%,
government.
Mr. Costa.
And shame on
Everybody
government.
used the
Gentlemen,
pandemic
stop
as an
it.
excuse.
Gentlemen,
This
Nobody
is a
would go to
simple
their
thing.
office.
It's
gentlemen,
very simple.
gentlemen,
It's a safety issue, and if the borough is held harmless, no harm, no foul. But
gentlemen.
guess what? That is contrary to what that board approved a year and a half ago. And the county came in and said, okay, this is what it is, and we have jurisdiction. But there was testimony, and it was an approval, and it was based on something. And if that is changed, it might change the mentality of the board.
Rob, let's
All I care about is whether or not this town is not going to be subject to some lawsuit, God forbid, somebody gets hurt. And I think that's where Mr. Merman is.
Exactly.
I think I need to chime in on this a little bit now, because I think we're proceeding on a false premise. If this board decides to vote yes and proceed, the fact that the county denied it is not going to absolve us of liability. If we know that it is a dangerous condition that we're putting into effect here, okay, we're not going to be absolved of liability just because the county kicked it back to us. So let's not go under that premise, because that's not a correct premise. Okay, if we know this is going to be dangerous, just because the county didn't allow us to change it, if we proceed with that danger, then we may be liable, and it may not be a defense that the county didn't allow us to make this. But I would propose that maybe we can think of some other creative ways to get around this, rather than sit here and argue back over these procedural issues. There's an issue that needs to be resolved, and maybe there's some more creative ways to go about it. What about an overpass for people crossing?
Well, then we're back to square one.
All right, let's
I mean, if that needs to be done, that needs to be done. But maybe that's a way that we can go around it, and we can let these people do what they need to do. It may be a little more delayed, but an overpass would get around all these issues, wouldn't it?
All right, gentlemen, let's table that thought for a second. Nailima, would you finish your thoughts on where we stand at the moment?
yes, so, and Mr. Barrett was at all hearings, I was as well, and Mr. Costa, I understand what you're saying, and I understand the board's concerns. I understand that this was a major issue when this application was before the board, and the board wanted whatever it wanted within the county, on the county road, within the county right-of-way and the like. However, the reality is that procedurally, the board did vote to approve this application, subject to county approval. When I say subject to county approval, not meaning it was going to trigger a return to the board, but that county had jurisdiction over the improvements that are under discussion right now.
That was not my intent.
Mr. Merman, if I can just finish for 1 minute.
Go ahead.
The intention is that, and the applicant agreed to this, was to defer or delay adoption of a memorializing resolution until such time as the county took action. and I'm gonna go on record
That's
tonight.
not my recollection. My recollection
That's
is
right.
they had to defer it to get the easement for the sewer because they couldn't get through private property.
Well, that was a different issue.
If again, if they're here tonight just to memorialize a resolution, it's subject to county approval. But again, there was a huge discussion on that aspect.
The issue though is, Mr. Acosta, is that there was no.
I just don't want to get sued. You know what it is, Naima?
I
I'm tired
understand.
of getting sued. I'm tired of getting sued.
I understand.
And I'm going to protect the borough, and that's my feelings, that's my opinion, that's my professional opinion. I think they have to put everything on the record, and the board needs to re-vote on a resolution, not a final resolution.
When I made,
Hold on,
when
let
I
me ask
made the
Naima a question. Naima, is it appropriate or inappropriate for the board to vote no, given our current condition?
I don't think it's appropriate for the board to vote no. I think the applicant is simply before the board for this resolution to be memorialized and adopted tonight. And again, unless we go back and we watch the audio, we listen to the audio, if it was recorded, whatever it may be. But I was there at both hearings, and I've been in contact with the applicant's counsel. And my recollection is what it is, which is that the board voted to approve this and basically said, look, county, this is now within your jurisdiction. You decide how you want to handle this. Unfortunately, the county has decided that the improvements that this board requested were not appropriate.
So let me ask you a follow-up question, because that is not, your recollection is not my recollection. My recollection is more like Mr. Costa and Mr. Merman. But if this board should vote no, what liability or would we be open to a lawsuit?
I don't think that's something we should be discussing on the record tonight. I think if this board is concerned with regard to potential litigation, that is a discussion to be had in closed session.
All right. Then my third question would be, can we postpone and have that closed session discussion?
Before we get there, I'm going to ask Mr. Barrett what his feeling is on that. Mr. Barrett, it may behoove you to have your client postpone the adoption of this resolution to allow us to resolve this issue in terms of procedurally where we left this when your client was before the board and exactly what that vote entailed. If you need 5 minutes to talk to your client, that's certainly understandable. I'm not asking you to make an on-the-spot decision.
I think I understand the town's concern. And I think that has been adequately expressed this evening, that there is a situation over which you have no control, and that's the county road. If you're saying no, that you're not going to allow my client to develop its property, then you are going to face a lawsuit, and you're going to lose, in my opinion. Now, we will be happy to join in your concern on the county's actions, but there's nothing we can do about it. We needed to secure the county approval, and the only way we could do it was to remove what you had requested that we put in on their road. But it's their road, it's not your road. And they are responsible for the safety of that road.
If something happens, it's on the county, and this board did everything that it could. Again, I was there, did everything it could, put in all the appropriate conditions in order to protect your residents, in order to protect patrons of the museum. Unfortunately, the county disagreed.
So, Ms.
I
Naimi,
don't agree, but
Ms. Naimi, is it your legal opinion that the borough is obligated to vote yes to avoid a lawsuit, and that the county is solely responsible for the current conditions?
I can't speak to the lawsuit again. That's a closed session item, but in terms of liability, if anything happens on the county road, it's on the county. County has sole jurisdiction.
Okay, then my suggestion would be that the applicant will erect a fence to stop people from cutting across that parking lot and forcing them to the intersection. If that's what the county wants, to force them to the intersection, erect a fence, no harm, no foul.
Rob,
Now we've done everything we need to do.
right, Rob, if that's something that you're suggesting on the record tonight, would it be my recommendation that you be more specific in terms of the linear feet for the fence, the height and the like, so the applicant knows what it's agreeing to. And
I mean, we don't want to cut off any sight distance. Chain link fence, black, 4 feet in height, 3 feet in
6
height,
feet. 6 feet, Mr. Costa.
6 feet in height, have the board vote on it, and that's it,
Yeah.
and move on. And then people cannot cut across that parking lot,
Rob,
and it will be forced in the intersection.
Rob, so that the applicant understands, are you able to, at this point in time, or if you take 5 or 10 minutes, able to come up with the amount of linear feet?
Yeah, it's on the drawing.
You'll fence, Nailimi, you'll fence in up to the intersection of Hackensack Avenue and the jug handle at the light.
Okay,
And this way it'll force people to go in that direction to cross into that. And then that solves the problem.
6 feet in height is what you're looking for?
I didn't say 6, I said 3 or
I
4,
said
but
6.
the vice chair said 6.
4 feet they'll climb over.
I'm sorry, Mr. Merman, you said you're okay with 4?
No, I'm okay with 6 feet, not 4 feet. 4 feet they'll climb over.
I
Mr.
think you're
Barrett?
gonna need, I think you would need a variance for 6 because it's in a front yard. So the board, probably 3 you do not, and they probably didn't notice for a 6-foot variance, I would imagine.
3 is the magic number, yes, in a
Think
front
so, right,
yard.
Tom?
Yeah.
That would need to go along the jug handle too. You can't
Correct.
just have it on that. What is
Correct.
that?
Yeah,
And that might be, that might solve everybody's problem. It'll have a barrier. The board installed this based on what the county did. Everybody moves on tonight. And again, I'm not an attorney. There's plenty of attorneys on the screen tonight.
I have a question for us going forward here. So, I mean, I do remember these discussions and, you know, obviously we had something that we thought would fit here. How do we avoid not getting this situation again? You know, I mean, we did it subject to, but how do we get to a situation where the county didn't approve it, but our concerns still aren't met? I mean, if we can figure out.
Normally, based on the county normally goes with what the town says. This is kind of this is not a normal situation at that jug handle.
But maybe
I think that's what it
maybe
is.
it's some other entity next time, you know, like if this resolution is subject to this one issue and that one issue is not fixed, then, you know, how does that resolution still, you know, and again, I want to make this all.
They're at a higher jurisdiction. The problem is you're at the lower end of the totem pole or the pyramid. They're at a higher jurisdiction. That's what
But
it
if
comes
it's
down.
subject to this working, and I forget exactly what they all were. I know we had flashing lights and
Right.
stop signs and things, but you know, if it's subject to those things happening, then why are we not taking, you know, step backs, or how do we keep this from happening going forward? And I get we're at the bottom of the food chain and all of that, but
Very simple. If you think again, it's subject to a county approval. Normally it's approved the way it is that you guys approve it. In this case, it wasn't. If it's a de minimis change, no harm, no foul. If it's a major change, then it could create a new application before this board, depending on how the board feels and votes.
The application itself has not changed. You requested that we perform certain off-site improvements, and we put those on the plan at your request. Those plans were rejected by the agency which has jurisdiction over where you wanted us to place those items.
Right. Correct.
It's very simple.
I'm not arguing that, Mr. Barrett. I'm just looking forward to how do we prevent us having our kind of hands.
But if Mr. Barrett's 100% correct. But what the board has to say is they approve something based on something. And if that basis has changed, the board could look at it again and say, okay, that's all well and good. We didn't get what we want. And now you're not going to approve what they ultimately came in. And Mr. Barrett said he said it a couple of minutes ago. If you deny this, he'll go to court and he thinks he can win. Maybe he can, maybe he can't.
May I just jump in to try to answer Mr. Gibbons' point? You know, I think that the answer to how to avoid this in the future is just to learn from this experience. And what I mean by that is in the future, if the board is going to be passing something, knowing that it could in effect be overruled or vetoed by the county, or that the board may not get what it actually wants to get out of something because it's out of the board's power, it's in the county's power, then I think the board needs to anticipate that in the future and put that in the language of what it is approving. So maybe everyone understood what subject to meant at the time, but maybe in the future, it has to be said even more explicitly. It has to be said, if the county does not do X, Y, and Z, the board is not obligated to support this action. And then just quickly, the second thing that the board can do is just what Mr. Costa is recommending, which is come up with another creative solution that is within the property owner's power to do, and try to work with the property owner to implement something that does satisfy the board in a different way. So I think those are the two things that we can do in the future if we know that we're running up against this kind of risk.
The latter is the only option in terms of if the board were inclined to say, okay, if the county doesn't approve something, this is your plan B, right? This is your other option. Or to statutory bodies and they have a certain amount of time to act. So this is always subject to any and all additional approvals, whether it be county or state. So if that's what the board is inclined to do going forward, it should be the latter suggestion, not the former. Just because you don't want to run up against those statutory timeframes.
Yeah, I just wanna keep-
Mr. Barrett, I'm sorry, just a quick question. Are you prepared to go forward with the suggestion of our engineer with the fence tonight?
I have to speak to my clients, Mr. Alcalyan.
Can you call them, you think, and we could take a few-minute recess so you can confer with your client?
Well, I can tell
We
you
can
this,
put
though.
if we can put this to bed tonight by getting an okay for the fence, I think it would behoove everybody here for you to make that call, if you
Well,
can.
I think that I see Mr. Smith is with us, and Ms. Restivo, I assume, is also the current president. The problem is, though, that you're telling us that we now have to go back to the DEP because you want the fence on their property.
Well, you have a lease with them, correct?
We have a parking agreement. That's
Yeah,
correct.
so I'm gonna imagine the parking agreement allows you to make certain improvements to the lot, striping and so forth. I don't know if a fence is really gonna be something they're gonna hem and haw about.
I don't know either until
That's a
we,
safety item.
make the call.
Or, okay,
All right, so if you can give me a few minutes, I can call my client and, give you an appropriate response.
okay.
I think Mr.
Well,
Smith is trying to say something.
Before Mr. Barrett makes that call, board members, what happens if his client agrees, they go back to the DEP and the DEP says, no, what then?
Well, then at least we try it again.
Well, I think
The
also,
seriousness of this issue is safety. And we all
I can tell you how you
recognize
could do it. Put a breakaway fence on
Mhm.
the county
Temporary.
right of way. That's all.
Right.
That's it. Next. The county wants this, then they can approve a breakaway fence on their right of way.
And if you have a
And you don't have to
licensing,
go down to the DEP.
and if they receive the licensing agreement to use the lot, I don't think anybody's gonna hem and haw about putting
I'm saying, make it easy. If Eric Timsack, who I know for many, many, many years, and if that's what they want, and it's the board's purview to put a fence to stop people from walking in that direction, you put a breakaway fence and move on. And that's the end of it. The applicant will get a license agreement. That's what they want. This is what the board wants, and move on. And we'll get involved to make sure it happens. This way, they don't have to go
One of
down
the-
to the
excuse-
DEP.
excuse me, one of the items in the resolution points out that when there are occasions where the lot's going to be used, there's either a parking attendant or sometimes the special police are called in to assist. It's not.
Yeah, Mr. Barrett, that's very good, but those things have a tendency of disappearing with time, and we both know that. It's great today, but is it gonna work 2-3 years down the road? Not necessarily. Okay, they'll change. What you need something is physical. Definitely physical. Your situation works great at high volumes of visitors. What happens when you have a lower volume? All right, that's what we're really concerned about.
So let's give Mr. Barrett a few minutes to make a phone call. I'll make a motion that we take a 5-minute recess.
Second,
Have a second?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think we needed to take a poll of the board members for changing the place of, well, the chambers versus the continued Zoom.
Yeah, I think let's take a short recess. It's 8:21 right now. Let's come back at 8:30. Have a motion on recess, please.
Yeah, I made the motion on a recess.
and I second.
We just need a call.
Thank you. We're standing in recess until 8:30.
You probably need Chris, you probably need a vote. All in favor?
Please, sorry, yeah. Thank you.
Aye.
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 Motion carries. We'll come back at 8:30. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. They had to, like, initiate him in or something.
Are you gonna take roll call when we re-adjourn?
Marina, do we need to take a roll call?
She's on mute.
Yeah. Marina, do we need to take a roll call?
Yeah, we should do a roll when we come back from the recess.
Right, yeah, okay.
Gary, you're unmuted.
I'm not muted.
Unmute.
Barrett is back. Okay. I think we're just missing Mr. Eric Kelly and
Mr. Arkelian is back. Sorry. I hit-
there he is, and the councilman's here. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we
Mr. Barrett?
appreciated if,
Mr. Barrett, hold on one second.
Barrett,
Sorry.
before you say anything, I have a question for Mr. Costa. Mr. Costa, this is like,
Eileen, we got-
Nailima, should we do a roll before coming
Yes.
back from recess? Okay.
yes, you should. Once you do that, I have a question for Mr. Costa.
Mr. Mayor,
Time now is 8:32. We're now
8:30.
reconvening the meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board, May 26, 2021. Marina, would you call the vote, please?
yes. Mr. Mayor,
Present.
Mr. Caslin,
Here.
Mr. Merman,
Here,
Mr. Grasso? Mr. Grasso?
I see him.
I see him, but he's on mute. It's okay. Mr. Arkelian,
Yes.
Councilman Kanigo,
Here.
Mr. Gibbons,
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Here.
Mr. Esposito.
Here.
Okay.
Mr. Costa, I don't know where you are. You keep moving around. It's like musical.
No, no, I'm
score.
in the same spot. I'm
You're
in
there,
the
there
same
you-
spot.
All right, I need to have the visual. So,
Okay.
Mr. Costa, let me ask you this question. Do you have any recommendations such that the applicant does not have to return either to the county or the DEP? And it's a suggestion that will address the board's concerns regarding.
Right. And again, what I said earlier, and I know Mr. Merman probably disagrees, I think put the fence at 3 feet, run around the perimeter of the parking lot to push people to the intersection. It creates a physical barrier. 3 feet isn't going to impact any sight distances there. Make it a chain link fence so people can see through it as far as the cars. It creates the barrier. If somebody wants to jump over a 3-foot fence and get hit by a car, then I think the onus is on them. But at least the board, I think it goes back to the spirit of what was approved. It's not a huge cost to the applicant. If they have to get permission from the DEP, if they want to do that, so be it. If not, put it in the county right of way. I will certainly call the county tomorrow. If you do it as a breakaway, it's not going to impact anything, and the county would give you an agreement to do so. They've done it on the past, recently on Kinderkamack Road. I cannot imagine that they wouldn't do it here. That would be my recommendation, and I will help them get this approved. I will make the phone call tomorrow morning. Mr. Barrett, the tennis ball is in your side of the court.
we'd like it to be carried for a couple of weeks so we can investigate. What your recommendation?
Mr. Barrett, if I may make a suggestion, if your client intends to carry this, if you would please reach out to my office, perhaps you, myself, Mr. Costa can get on the phone and discuss how to address this and try to move this forward.
Certainly.
Rob, you available?
I have no problem with it. Mr. Barrett, I'm available if you want to litigate this. The first deposition will be probably 3 times more than the cost of a 3-foot fence, but certainly I'm around tomorrow morning. You can certainly call me.
Certainly, Mr. Costa, be happy to.
Okay.
And we'll need a motion to carry them, please.
we also need him to agree formally to carry it.
Well, I mean,
I
there's another.
requested it.
I think you requested it, yeah. So
let me ask you one other question, Nailima, before we push this off and carry it. Can the board actually approve this tonight based on a 3-foot fence, and then it's up to them to come back to change the resolution?
I'd rather we not do that just in case something happens with the county. I think it becomes very convoluted. My recommendation is let's go with council's suggestion. Let's carry this for one more cycle, meaning till the next board meeting. Let the three of us get on the phone together. I know Eric Timsack, you know Eric Timsack.
I do.
Reach out to the county.
Okay.
Put this to bed.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion then to carry this topic to the next meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Marina?
But before we do that, Mr. Barrett, you asked for this to be carried. So of course, that means your clients extends all timeframes for the board to adopt the memorializing resolution, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tom, good seeing you.
Marina?
I'm going to see you again,
do-
Rob. Very
I
shortly.
know, I'm gonna see you shortly, quite frankly, because of Kennecott Road.
Hold on, formality, let's call the roll.
The roll, okay. Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Caslin,
Yes.
Mr. Merman,
Yes,
Mr. Grasso,
Yes.
Mr. Arkelian,
Yes.
Councilman Kanigo,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
Yes,
Okay, the application will be carried.
The memorializing resolution will be carried.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Barrett, thank you very much. We will see you in a couple of weeks
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
on this particular topic. Stick around, coming back. to
Yes,
it.
sir.
You're right. The next item of business on the agenda for this evening is the completeness review. The application is from Paul I. Perkins and Belkis A. R. Perkins. The address 311 Kindercamack Road, block 1004, lot 26. This is an application for a subdivision of an existing parcel into 2 new building lots.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Right.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thomas J. Barrett for the applicants.
Good evening, Mr. Barrett. Welcome back again.
So this is the old River Edge Animal Hospital on the corner of Howland and Kindercamack. And I believe it was Dr. Nisenholtz, if I recall correctly, who was there. So my clients purchased the property a couple of years ago. They would like to, as their testimony will bear out, they would like to subdivide it. They would like to make improvements to the existing dwelling. They'd like to erect a new dwelling on a lot to be created to the west, so up Howland Avenue. The application, based upon the existence of the current home, does require a couple of variances in terms of lot width for the new lot, lot area. The total lot area currently is over 17,000 square feet. The new lots would be 10,000 plus and 7,000 plus. Also, as a result of the improvements contemplated to the existing dwelling, we would be requesting a front yard setback of 25 feet, whereas 30 feet is required. Since we are a corner lot, we have 2 front yards. Also, by subdividing the property, what is now a side yard becomes the rear yard. And that is deficient in that the dwelling would be a little over 5 feet from the sideline, whereas a minimum of 7.5 feet is required. So that would be another variance. That's basically the application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. Ms. Finley?
So prior to to tonight's meeting, I reviewed the proof submitted by the applicant, and they are acceptable for the board to have jurisdiction to proceed tonight.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Barron's, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'll add that I did review the application materials and they are generally sufficient. I do have a question just so that the board knows what they're voting on. It appears that there were architectural plans submitted for lot 26.02, but that dwelling is not shown on the subdivision plan. So my question is whether or not the board is merely approving the subdivision or if it's also being requested to approve the dwelling on lot 26.02 tonight as well.
I think that the drawings were simply submitted to show the board what is being, what is being contemplated as being developed on the lot. I think that if the subdivision is granted, that we would still, be required, of course, to follow, all the setbacks, et cetera.
Okay.
What we have discussed is if the board were to see fit to grant the subdivision, that the new home would be constructed as close to the new westerly line, thereby increasing the distance between the existing home and the new home. So that, the 7.5 foot setback would be adhered to along that westerly line and the home located there within the footprint that is shown.
I'd appreciate that. I'm sure we'll discuss that more. So at this point, it seems that dwelling situation is conceptual then. And, but again, from my standpoint, the materials are sufficient to be determined complete. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mr. Costa, any comments from you at this time?
I certainly agree with Mr. Behrens. I think it's complete and let it fly. But again, the same comment, they submitted plans, but it's not shown on the site plan on the other architectural, so the board can look at it as it may, but it might require variances and stuff. Again, but it's not shown.
Okay, get into that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comments, questions from the board?
I have a question.
Mr. Grasso?
I looked earlier at the plans. This is for Mr. Barrett. And I see one of the lots. It's showing, I'm not sure if it's the lot I assume it's the lot where the house is presently existing, that there's going to be a variance required for the rear yard setback, which the statute requires 25 feet and it has approximately 5 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's as a result of the fact that it's a corner lot and has two front yards. And the ordinance, I believe, states that if is it the address dictates then which is the rear yard?
Correct.
Am I getting that
Opposite
right?
of the address.
Mr.
Right.
Behrens? Yeah. So
You got it
because,
right, yes.
because the Kennecott frontage is the front yard for determining the rear yard, what is, currently a side yard becomes the rear yard. And it's as a result of the existing dwelling that's there that, yes, would result in a 5-point-something foot rear yard.
So the new proposed lot is going to front on Howland.
That is correct.
So it's a somewhat of a technicality that it's going to be a 5 foot backyard for the existing house, but it's going to appear more like a side yard for the new home.
Correct.
Because
Mr. Chairman, I think we're starting to get into testimony as opposed to
Yeah.
completeness. Let's just go into
Okay.
completeness and then we'll come
Why
back.
don't we hold off on that? Okay, any further comments? Okay.
I just have one other comment. Since this application deals with a D variance, the mayor and councilmen are not eligible to participate in the voting on the application. And any alternates can't sub in for the mayor or the councilman. They can just sub in for the other absent members tonight. So it would be alternate for Ms. Boland and for Mr. Cray.
Marina,
Yes?
when that statute, are the mayor and council allowed to discuss the application, but just not vote on it, or neither?
No, they shouldn't participate in the discussion on the application.
Okay, then, Marina, I think the appropriate thing would be for Councilman Kinigo and I to step away. Do we need to return for the,
Walker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I didn't know what procedure you wanted to do, Mr. Caslin, if we wanted to go to the Walker application next and
We're
so
gonna
they
go
can
to that
stay
next.
on.
Right.
For
Right.
completeness, it's fine, but for the actual testimony on the application, you'll have to leave.
Do I need to step away also or not? I'm just,
No, you're just observing, so that's fine.
You're the tech person.
I need you, yeah. All right, we have a motion to approve for completeness.
So moved on a completeness.
Second.
Second,
Okay. Ms. Finley, do we need a roll?
Yeah, we can do the roll. Mr. Caslin,
Yes.
Ms. Boland is absent tonight. Mr. Merman,
Yes.
Mr. Grasso,
yes.
Mr. Arkelian,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
and Mr. Esposito.
Yes.
Okay, so the application has been deemed complete and we'll come back
Yeah.
shortly.
We'll come back to you, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to go out of order on the items on the agenda. We're going to shift now to old business. This application was carried from the prior meeting on May 12th. The application is Walker, Brent, and Chantel, 164 Webb Avenue, Block 401, Lot 15, a proposed addition to existing dwelling with variance relief for lot coverage.
And just for the record, at the prior hearing, the applicants were duly sworn in to provide testimony, and you'll still be under oath tonight.
Okay, looks
Ms.
like
Walker.
Ms. Walker is here. Good evening.
good evening, everybody.
Mr. Merman, if you,
Yes.
since I was not present at the last meeting, I'd like to ask if you
I can give a quick summation.
would please.
Mr. Barron's, if you need to amend or correct it when I'm done, please do so. The applicant came in, and what's happening is they're asking for a variance. Well, the major driving variance is the improved lot coverage, which I believe is 41.7, or very close to that. And that's being triggered by an existing basketball court on the east side of the house, which there was a question as to whether it was permanent or not. And there's also some discussion about the imperviousness of it. That was one of the main driving items for that. The applicant felt very strongly about having to eliminate any portion of that court. And the board listened very intently. And we did know that there was a shed on the property in the back of a minor size. Applicant stated that the garage was being used basically other than parking due to its size especially. And we asked the applicant to go back and review their site plan and see where we can make a reduction in improved lot coverage that would fall below the 40%, which we felt in this case was probably appropriate. We did note that the lot is a corner lot of a very large size. I believe the number was about 8,500 square feet. So the percentages become very important from a square foot standpoint. I will note, Mr. Chairman, while I have this opportunity that a next door neighbor did send in a letter regarding the application. And I believe if I could summarize her letter, she approved of the situation. Basically, she did not take any disapproval of the application. In the meantime, I believe Mr. Barrett and Mr. Costa had some discussions, because when we left it, we asked them to huddle and put their heads together and determine whether it was pervious or impervious and so forth. And Mr. Barron returned with a letter that said it basically technically was did technically affect the improved lot coverage. In the meantime, I believe it was yesterday, I received a letter from Mr. Costa's office that suggested subsurface disposal for some runoff from the site, particularly I think it was the dwelling. That's a summary of where we are or were. I do have some suggestions as how we can correct maybe the situation. But from a summary standpoint, that's it. I'd like to hear from the applicant to see if give them the opportunity to weigh in and see if they came up with anything.
Ms.
Yes.
Walker?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that summary. If you took that burden off of me to have to summarize that, so I appreciate that very much. I do have my site plan and a few ideas for amendment, but I was hoping prior to getting to that point that this board might consider further review of our original proposal. I note that in 2020, when I did my own research, that variance relief for improved lot coverage exceeding 40% was granted to 5 different applicants in the calendar year, one of which was a fairly significantly sized back concrete patio that was ultimately used for a basketball court, very similar, I think, to what we're doing here. And I was simply hopeful before we got into any kind of alterations of our site plan that this board might give our family the same courtesy as these residents that came before you previously.
Mr. Chairman, you want to carry from this point on, or you want me to respond?
Why don't you go ahead and respond, because I think you're.
Okay. Yes, that's the purpose of the land use board, is to grant variances, but they're reviewed and granted on a case-by-case basis. Yes, there probably are similar situations that we could find from a case study type of or history type of viewpoint, but each applicant stands on its own, each application. So if I can suggest something, sort of cut to the chase here, and I think maybe everybody would be happy. Mr. Costa, as I noted, Mr. Costa's office issued a letter yesterday, and the letter basically suggested subsurface drainage. What I would like to see happen is that that subsurface drainage be calculated and installed so large enough so that you can reduce your improved lot coverage to below 40%, 40% or slightly below. And it's just a matter of digging a bigger hole. I think that way you could hook up let's assume for the sake of discussion, it would be in the front yard. You hook up your new roof drains in the front yard, and your calculation would show that your total improved lot coverage would meet something more desirable. As I said, perhaps below 40%. So that's what I'm suggesting. It would solve the problem. You would keep your basketball court, you would keep a happy family. Your neighbor is is happy. And I think in this case, when you're adding an extra level to a house, that the cost additional would incurred would be reasonable. How does that sound?
On the surface, it sounds like a lovely compromise. I'm a little bit uneducated about the about what exactly that means. Is that the seepage pit that?
It would be basically a seepage pit, yes.
Okay, okay, and it would be dug out in the front yard.
Well, I'm suggesting the front yard. It could be anywhere on the site. And as long as you hooked in sufficient roof drainage, would be the easiest way to do it. You can meet the criteria that we're talking about, the 40% or lower.
Mr. Merman, can you give me an idea of the additional cost of that to the project, simply because I have not encountered that before?
I could not. If Mr. Costa is still on the line, he might be in a better position. I don't hear him, so I guess he's not on.
No, I'm here. I'm here, Mr. Vice Chair. You know what? I used to know the numbers off the top of my head when I was young, but I'm old. And recently, because of what's going on with the with contractors today, I think probably the best thing is to reach out for your contractor. You're going to have equipment there. I know a lot of contractors seem to be taking advantage of a lot of people recently. So it would be very difficult to come up with that number. It's not going to be hundreds. It's probably going to be thousands, but not hundreds of thousands. A couple of thousand.
Okay, that's a ballpark enough for me.
Yeah, I just looked at the plans. I think probably less than the cost of the plans.
Okay, that we can do. Thank you. I just wanted a general ballpark.
And I'm not here to stop anyone from playing basketball. I went to Madonna School in Fort Lee. Because of the ceiling height, I never got any NBA because I could never do the jump shot. So enjoy, play basketball.
You can come over to the court and relive.
I don't think I can anymore, but thank you so much. But that would be our suggestion. And again, I think the board, and the only reason Tom and I had a very not a very short conversation the other day, but I think because of what you put down, and a lot of people in town could put down the same thing. I just think it's important that the board looks at these things and it doesn't affect the neighbors. And again, I know there was a letter today from your adjacent neighbor. They're happy with it. It's not affecting them, from a drainage standpoint. And that's really that all that matters. And if other people in town want this, fantastic. But at least the board would have an opportunity to look at it to make sure, and the neighbors could vet this out to make sure it doesn't impact them. And that's why Tom and I had that discussion, and I think we were both in agreement, and that's why that letter was written. Good luck. And
I would just have a question for Mr. Costa or Mr. Merman, whoever wants to answer, just for my own education. How does the seepage pit bring their impervious coverage down?
It doesn't. What it's going to do is it's going to manage whatever stormwater, if the board decides to approve it. And again, the whole idea is to have open space, to have green, to have all the above. Right. If it doesn't affect that, the worst case scenario is that the impervious affects drainage, which affects an adjacent property owner. And now you wind up in a lawsuit, which this town has wound up in years ago. And that's why this whole seepage pit was implemented with the stormwater rules that we put in, that the mayor and council put in place. The whole idea is if this board approves something, it's built, and that construction ultimately doesn't affect the adjacent property owners with water problems. So that's why we do it.
So we're basically saying that this size seepage pit, whatever the size is, can basically reduce their coverage.
We're going to be here at 10:30.
It doesn't reduce the coverage, but it reduces the impact. It reduces the impact of the coverage.
Right. Okay. Okay.
You manage the impact of the coverage.
Okay. I haven't heard that discussed here before in that regard of reducing the impact and kind of changing that number.
No. It reduces, if the board decides that they can live with in excess of 40%, it reduces the impact of that additional coverage.
It's a mitigating.
I don't want to disconnect.
Yeah, this would be one of the mitigating factors that the board could look to support the grant
The
of the
variance.
variance.
Correct.
I haven't, just an additional comment. The board could also consider granting the variance with respect to improved lot coverage specifically for, as it relates to the sport court and the fact that the sport court itself is a pervious surface. So then if the applicant wanted to put like a patio in there, they couldn't because this variance is specific for the sport court and not, it wouldn't, and the reason why the board would grant the variance is because it doesn't have the
Okay.
impact
Good
of a
idea.
regular patio.
Right. But if other individuals in town want this, they would have to come back before this board and get an approval. They can't just walk into the building department and say, this is what we're going to put in.
No, correct, yeah.
Right.
You're talking about the court.
The court.
Correct.
Okay, so we're recognizing that this court is part of the lot coverage.
Correct.
I think you have to treat it that way. And again, this is the conversation Tom and I had the other day. I don't think you can consider it pervious. It's not grass. It's not gravel. It's DGA. Maybe it perks, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you'd have to do testing on it. But in essence, you're putting a surface down, and I think maybe it's not 100% impervious. Maybe it's not 100% pervious. But I think if anybody else wants to do this specific thing, I think they need the approval of this board.
Right, and we should. And, you know, my tongue-in-cheek question was going to be, can I stop cutting my front lawn and put a basketball court in for my kids?
Right.
You know, so, and as I say, tongue-in-cheek, but
And again,
certainly
exactly.
to set precedent, it could turn out that people will just do that on their own.
Right, and I think each, and again, I know the, Ms. Walker, I heard you say 5 other houses were approved. The attorney didn't jump in and Tom didn't jump in. Every application stands on its own merits. No precedent is ever set, so it's always at an individual precedent. So if this board approves yours tonight, it doesn't mean they have to approve some other individual in town tomorrow because they gave it to you. Each applicant stands on its own merits.
Right. And Rob, to Rob's point, I think each of those variances also included some level of mitigation from the stormwater too, or was at least looked at. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I took a good hard look at this. I spoke with our professionals over this. It's a very special situation. Of course, you'd prefer the applicant to come in before they do something like this, but it is what it is at this point. I think it does serve a greater good because I drove by the other day and I saw a bunch of kids playing on it. So I'm going to guess that it wasn't just the Walker kids that were on it. So I think it serves a good purpose for the neighborhood. The neighbors are not bothered by the noise. Mr. Costa and Mr. Behrens have come up with a great solution for water management on this particular site because of this particular issue. And again, not setting a precedent on percentages. I think this is one of those applications that probably should be approved on its merit based on the fact that it's there already, and based on the fact that the reason they came in was because of that. Even though they're going to improve their property, it doesn't even affect what we're hearing tonight. So I don't want to take away their opportunity to improve their property and add a bedroom or whatever they need to do upstairs because of a basketball court. And I'm going to go with my own personal recommendation that we approve this application.
Thank you, Mr. Eric Gillian. Anyone else on the board?
I agree with Mr. Castle. May I speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I agree with Mr. Eric Gillian and with Mr. Merman and Mr. Costa's recommendation that if we make a motion that references the basketball court and that therefore someone cannot improve that area in a way unintended by this board, that I could definitely vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we need to open up to the public at this point.
I'll take a motion, we open to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any
Aye.
abstentions? Okay,
I believe we do have the individual who submitted the letter on the call today.
okay, Ms. Kaufman.
So there is someone that is just an attendee. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I will allow you to speak, or type something in the chat box. And if it's someone who's already a panelist, go ahead and speak if you desire to do so.
We did receive a letter from Mary Tantilla.
Okay, so let me ask her. Yeah.
Like we
And
have,
so we can read the letter into the record based on the new emergency rules for remote meetings, but it's preferable to have Ms. Tantillo speak.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
good
And
evening,
could you just state your name for the record and provide your address, please?
Yes, my name is Mary Tantillo. The address is 156 Webb Avenue, River
Okay,
Edge, New Jersey.
Thank you. And if you just want to share what you wrote in your letter, your sentiments about the application, that would be great.
Yes, I had discussed with Chantel and Brent Walker about the about their application, and I have no objection to.
The alarm's fine, it hasn't gone off.
Well, it's going to.
Well,
Mr.
What happened here?
Mr. Mayor, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great improvement to their property. They're, lovely family with the 3 boys. I could see that they have lots of fun. It doesn't affect anything on my property. There's plenty of privacy on my front porch. They don't disturb us at all. And, I agree with the Walkers that they should, would have that, improvement on their property. And I think it would be, a good thing for them. So I have no objections to anything.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for appearing this evening. Do we have anybody else in the audience?
We do not.
Okay, very good. That being the case, may I have a motion to close to the public?
So made, Merman.
South second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstained? We are now closed to the public. At this,
So are you ready for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
you took the words out of my mouth, Mr. Merman.
Excuse me?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, so I'm doing pretty good tonight, huh? All right, I'll make a motion that the Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge grant approval to the Brent and Chantil Walker application at 164 Webb Avenue, River Edge, block 401, lot 15. That the variance is for an improved lot coverage based on the fact that there's an existing impervious surface, which is a sports court, and the applicant has agreed to install a subsurface disposal system. There's a licensed New Jersey design professional shall submit a signed and sealed drainage calculations and construction details to the borough engineer for a review and approval for this subsurface installation, and that the calculations are such as to reduce the improved impervious lot coverage to below 40%, and that the borough engineer shall inspect the installation, submit a written acceptance of this impervious item, of this infrastructure item, and that the certificate of occupancy be contingent upon the borough engineer's acceptance. I believe that's it.
Okay.
I just wanted the clarification. The percentage of improved lot coverage is going to be approved as what is requested by the applicant, but then the applicant is going to install the seepage pit to mitigate the impact of that improved
Now,
coverage.
yeah, the current condition of improved impervious lot coverage is going to be reduced to 40% or less. And that the sports court is the driving factor, and move would free up that amount of space. Now, I know that's perfectly clear.
I am just going
Mr.
back to
Merman,
Mr. Costa's point, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's what you, I think at this point, the sport court was put in. The board is approving that, but it has to be mitigated as far as stormwater management on that. You're not increasing the impervious coverage to affect this, because ultimately the coverage would go up way over probably 60%. So you're approving, if I get the motion correctly, you're approving the coverage at 40% or less, even though I believe the plans, Tom, I think of 41%.
41.7.
Right.
And Mrs. Walker, for the record, did you